The sort of real issue, or the sort of like potentially kills us all issue, is when the AIs are, uh, in some sense, actually smart.
Mhm.
The sort of critical threshold here is ability to make their own technology.
Mhm.
People are like, oh, well, I'm worried about if the AIs get access to the nukes.
Mhm.
But if you look at humanity as a species, humanity is not dangerous to other humans. We're not impressive because somebody else handed us nukes,
Mhm.
right? In the long arc of history, humanity is the sort of thing that, like, our ancestors started like naked in the savannah,
Mhm.
and we like made our own dang nukes,
Mhm.
right? There's this ability to sort of like look at the world, try and figure it out, manipulate it, force it into certain weird corners,
Mhm.
right? We didn't get nukes by learning to metabolize uranium to the point where we could enrich uranium with our stomachs, right?
Mhm.
We sort of figured it out with our minds and figured out how to sort of like torture uh, atoms into a situation where they would unleash nuclear energy,
Mhm.
right? This is um, like AIs aren't there yet, but the case where it gets crazy is where you have AIs that can do their own science, invent their own tech.
Right.
Now, there's a bunch of questions people tend to have here. One is like, why would these AIs be acting autonomously?
Mhm.
One is like, why would they be pursuing goals other than the ones that humans gave them?
Right.
One is like, what sort of tech could they really develop? One is like, why would they be developing this tech? One is like, why would they kill us rather than befriending us?
Mhm.
Right? I
You
can go in
could
any
you
of
could
those.
answer each of those with why wouldn't they? It's just as straightforward a question, or just as
You
obvious a question.
you could. Yeah, I think some people come in with intuitions that these AIs are just going to be tools that do exactly what we say, and they're like, well, a knife, it's not going to reach out and cut you. Other people are like, well, your knife is never outsmarting you. Your knife is never
Right.
trying to escape, right? We've already seen AIs try to escape in the lab. Um, each of these questions sort of has a technical answer that I could go into, depending where your interests are, depending where your intuitions are.
Mhm.
But maybe you're like, oh, it's kind of obvious to me.
Well, I
Uh,
know I've listened to a couple of your lectures, and I've learned a lot about alignment and interpretability. I understand I read the AI 2027
yeah,
report,
yeah,
which was kind of what turned me on to it in the first place. I
yeah,
get the case for the like lights out scenario.
yeah.
I guess but that said, I talk to different people and they have a different, it's all intuition, but people have a different sense of like, just how likely this is. So I guess
Yeah.
I'm wondering, just subjectively for you, are you worried about human extinction, or are you worried about something
Oh, yeah, human extinction.
that,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah.
And if you were to, like, do you think that is a outside chance, we're talking about
Oh,
human
no.
extinction. So if it's a 0.01% chance, that's a big deal.
No, no,
Or-
we're talking about, like, at least 95% on the current course we're on,
okay.
human extinction. We're just
Okay.
we're just like, there's just a cliff, and we're just careening towards the cliff, and some people are saying, "Hey, there's a cliff there," and other people are saying, like, "Don't be such a doomer." And, like,
Okay.
I'm not saying we can't stop the car,
Right.
right? But we're just going full steam towards the cliff.
Oh, when did you start to feel that way?
I mean, 2012, it was sort of easy for me to see in 2012. Now we're sort of much closer to the cliff edge. It's much clearer that we're at a cliff edge. In 2012 was more like, that looks kind of like a cliff edge through the fog.
Right.
Now we're like, oh yeah, there it
Right.
is,
Right.
right? So I didn't like have the same clarity in 2012, but um, like humanity is the sort of species that doesn't. It's hard for humanity to to handle challenges on the first try,
Right.
right? You have cases of, like, after Chernobyl, someone brought a Geiger counter reading to a
Mhm.
Soviet official who said, like, "That can't be, bring me a new reading,"
Mhm.
right? That's not like someone. I don't know how much you know about the Chernobyl incident, but, like, the way humanity reacts to issues is not that, like, some engineers realize that there's an issue with the RBMK reactors
Mhm.
and bring it to the Soviet officials and convince them, and they change the RBMK reactors.
Mhm.
The way the real world works is even after the reactor has literally exploded, and the
Mhm.
scientist is there being like, we went to the wreckage and read how much radiation there was, and it was a shitload.
Mhm.
Even then, so many
Mhm.
officials are like, no,
Right.
right? That's how humanity is,
Right.
right? And so it's not that we can't stop the car.
Mhm.
It's that like, and I've sort of like tried for 10 years to be like, hey, can we stop this car? And can we like build car wings before the car gets to the cliff edge?
Uh-huh.
Maybe if we have like decades and decades, we can figure out how to build car wings because
Mhm.
that's easier than getting people to stop the car. Um, like now it just looks like the cliff edge is right there and we're putting the pedal to the metal.
I just watched a lecture of yours from 8 years ago, to I think at Google,
Yeah, yeah.
and back then you felt the same way as you do now.
I mean, I had more hope back then of having more time than we now have. I had more hope back then of working in a different AI paradigm than this one,
Mhm.
which is in some sense uniquely bad, the
Mhm.
deep learning stuff. I could talk about why, but it really doesn't look good.
Mm.
Um, Back then I had more hope that like the world would put more resources
Mhm.
into to figuring out how to do the job properly here. Back then I was still spending my time trying to figure out how to make sure the job's done right before other people figure out how to do the job at all. There were a lot of things that looked more hopeful 8 years ago. It did look to me, it looked grim. It looked to me like the sort of thing that humanity probably wasn't going to get its act together about.
Right.
But like now we're sort of like 8 years later looking at humanity spending 8 years like strongly resisting getting its act together. And now we're like sort of, we're not literally in the emergency yet, but we're like quite a lot closer. Uh, I would say it was in 2012 when I was like, oh, this isn't looking good. And then, there's been ups and downs.
Mhm.
But it's, I think, looking worse than it looked.
I ask you, so just pushing back on the idea that humans, that the Geiger counter response is
Yeah.
the way that we naturally react to these things. I understand that, but also, and I'm sure you've thought about this too. There's also seems to be this sort of like um, chronic need for, especially people living in the modern age, to always have a story about the end of the world. I mean, you could trace it back to Christianity, but more recently, obviously, climate change was a big one. That's my entire life, and it's been like 30 years that I've been told that
Yeah.
next year, like 5, 10 years from now, everything's going to collapse. And politically, I realize that for folks who are warning about AI, that's probably one of your biggest impediments, because people are used to hearing this and they're used to it not coming true. But also, I wonder if there is, even if you like, I understand the arguments for why it's real, but does it seem to you that there is also sort of a psychological appeal?
I mean, as you say, I think that these days it's more like the opposite.
Uh-huh.
These days people are like, "Oh, well, like of course we're going to die from everything," right?
Right.
It's sort of like inoculates people more than I think it causes people to sort of look at the issues.
Mhm.
Um, it does seem to me um, that like I think much more than looking at human psychology. I just much prefer to look at the arguments,
Right.
right? Um, like you're not going to learn about what the like suppose humanity builds minds that think 10,000 times smarter than we do and like don't need to sleep and don't need to eat and can replicate themselves and can like share their knowledge immediately rather than needing 20 years for a new one to train them,
Right.
right?
Right.
How is that going to impact the world, right? You're not going to learn how that's going to impact the world by talking about like, oh, well, everyone always has a story about the end times, right?
Right.
Sort of like, um,
Yeah, no, I agree. This one has an actual causal chain of events that's hard to argue against.
yeah. And I mean, I think also if you look at like if you do want to play the game of looking at the history, I would say like climate change, it was like we're probably already seeing some of the effects for with like different hurricanes, which
Right.
turns out that's not that big a deal. And all of the sort of like big cataclysmic effects, if you talk to the like actual experts, they're always talking about 100-year timescales,
Right.
right? 1,000-year timescales, right? Maybe climate change is an issue on 100,000-year timescales, right? I'm personally um like not that worried about climate change because like this tree here is a machine that converts uh like carbon into wood,
Mhm.
right? Many people don't actually know where the mass in a tree trunk comes from,
Mhm.
right? Like, you have this tiny seed.
Mhm.
It grows into this hulking tree. It's not doing any nuclear physics, and
Mhm.
so, like, matter is conserved.
Mhm.
Where is it getting the matter? A lot of people think it sucks it up from the ground,
Mhm.
but that's not true. When you pull a tree out of the ground, you don't actually find, like, a anti-tree shaped hole.
Right.
You actually find even more wood in the roots,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Where's all this wood coming from?
Mhm.
The wood is coming about half water by weight. The other half is carbon.
Mhm.
That carbon is pulled directly out of the air,
Mhm.
right? People forget that these are machines that spin air into wood, right?
Mhm.
That's a technologically possible thing. We have them all around us. Um, could humanity get to that level of tech in 500 years and just pull the carbon out of the air?
Mhm.
Like, trees already pull carbon out of the air. The reason it doesn't solve global warming is that when trees die, they rot, and that
Mhm.
carbon is released back into the air, and the Earth is in equilibrium, right?
Mhm.
But it doesn't look like all of this is to say, like, the climate change stuff never really was that pressing a concern. We've had other pressing concerns that were like the hole in the ozone layer, right?
Right.
There's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, whatever happened to the hole in the ozone layer? What
We
happened is we
fixed
fixed it.
it.
Like, we banned the chlorofluorocarbons,
Yeah.
right? Like, we do have these cases of, like, there was an issue, we addressed it, the issue
Right.
went away.
Right.
It's not like it's impossible. You shouldn't go to the people with the chlorofluorocarbons and be like, oh, everyone always has a story about the end times. Friggin' regulate the
Right.
chlorofluorocarbons, right?
So, I know back when you were giving that lecture that I was referred to, you were saying that, our main goal back then needs to be that we figure out how to make a super intelligence or an AGI, I forget which one you were referring to, which is safe before we turn it on, and we only have one chance to do that.
Yeah, more or less.
Was your level of optimism then versus now basically that, like, it's now very clear to you that we are not going to that we're going to turn this that we're going to invent it and we're going to turn it on and it's not going to be anywhere close to
I mean,
safe?
if we invent it, I would say, like, 8 years ago, I sort of had, like, for all I knew back then, we could have had 30 years, we could have had 50 years,
Right.
right? For all I knew back then, maybe the whole of, like, the sort of, like, top intellectual talent in the world would notice this problem and turn towards it,
Right.
rather than just being like me and 3 employees or
Right.
whatever. Um, but uh, yeah, now it is very clear that we're not going. I would say it's not so much about safety. Safety is for seatbelts, right? When you're, like, in a car careening towards a cliff, you're not like, let's make sure the car is safer,
Right.
right? You would need to sort of like turn your car into an airplane on the fly,
Right.
right? That's not really car safety.
Mhm.
That's like
Magic.
I mean, it's probably it's maybe possible if you've
Right.
got enough resources, right? But like, people talk about, I'm not really an AI safety guy. I'm not like, you need to make this thing safe. I'm like, you need to do something that's more like turning a car into a airplane while you're, like, ideally you'd friggin' stop the car, so we
Right.
would need to, like, turn the car into an airplane while we're speeding at 100 miles an hour or whatever. But, like,
Mhm.
with the caveat that it's not so much about safety as this other thing. Yeah. Years ago, I was much more optimistic that we had the time and the ability to do that. Now I'm like, the cliff edge is too close. The car's going too fast. We don't have enough engineers realizing we need to turn this into an airplane. We have some
Mhm.
engineers who are like, oh, yeah, safety is important. Let me build a little seatbelt for us.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's useless, but I'm sort of like, we just, we're just like totally, totally not equipped for this.
In this metaphor, the challenge of turning the car into an airplane while it's driving 100 miles an hour, is that the problem of alignment?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So technically, this is where I'm completely out of my pay grade. Um, how would you describe the problem of alignment? Like technically, how difficult is it?
Yeah. So first, let me just say a couple words about what I use the word to mean.
Okay.
And a lot of people mean a lot of different things by alignment these days. The AI companies always are trying to water the word down. Be like, look how aligned my AI is. It's now
Uh-huh.
flattering users. That's very aligned. It's
Uh-huh.
giving the users what they want, right? I have some claim to the word alignment in that I think I have. Uh, I think it's between me and Stuart Russell in terms of academic priority, in terms of whether you count, like, who had the first white paper out versus
Hmm.
who's hit the conference venue first or whatever, or the journal first. I think it was Stuart Russell's suggestion, the word alignment, but regardless, it happened. The way this word alignment came about is, I think it was like Luke Melhauser. me, Rob Bensinger, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who are all four at Miri, and Stuart Russell,
Mhm.
Berkeley AI professor, who are brainstorming about what word to use that's not safety.
Mhm.
And anyway, uh, what I what I use the word alignment to mean is about uh, pointing an AI at certain objectives, right? It's about, can you make an AI that does a thing of your choosing,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people think that alignment is about, like, if you had a magical genie on a leash, what would you ask the genie to do such that you actually liked the answer? How would you avoid the curse of King Midas? That is not where I see the lion's share of the alignment problem. That is not, but I would love to have a problem that easy. I would love it to be the case that we had these, like, wish granting AIs and we
Right.
just had the problem of figuring out how to ask for the right wish.
Right.
That's not the world we live in. The issue, like like uh other people think, or sort of like set aside the problem of like defining what it means to be good. Set aside the problem of you know, like all the moral issues of like, what would you have if you had super intelligences and they could affect society in some way? How would you ask them to affect society in a way that both makes it better but doesn't, take away people's uh like humanity's ability to affect its own fate, blah blah blah. All sorts of fun, thorny like moral issues there. Set all of that aside.
Mhm.
Imagine you were trying to make an AI that just tried to turn the universe into diamond,
Mhm.
try to make as much diamond as it could, right? We
Mhm.
sort of we know what diamond is pretty well.
Mhm.
It's, carbon atoms covalently bound in a tetrahedral shape,
Mhm.
right? It's pretty easy to specify,
Mhm.
right? Could you make an AI that just tried to turn everything into diamond? The answer right now is no.
Mhm.
Like not even this highfalutin make it good stuff. We have like no way to point AIs at what we want to point them at.
Mhm.
All we're doing is sort of like, I don't know how much you know about how these things are made, but we're basically taking like enormous computers and we have some method of feeding them data and shaping them according to the data.
Mhm.
We understand the algorithms that combine the enormous amount of computing power and the data in order to shape the computers. We don't understand what comes out of it,
Mhm.
right? It's this like huge wacky mess. Um, it behaves however it happens to behave.
Mhm.
It's not crafted like other software. There's no, when Sidney Bing a few years ago threatens Kevin Roose and tries to break up his marriage,
Mhm.
there's no like uh threatened New York Times reporter
Mhm.
equals true line
Mhm.
in there, right?
Mhm.
There's no, you can't go in there and take that out. No one put that in on
Mhm.
purpose,
Mhm.
right? It's just all this like crazy junk,
Mhm.
right? And like modern ChatGPT, you maybe have seen stories about how it's sort of like people go psychotic when they're talking to
Yeah.
ChatGPT, right? And like you may say, oh, that's people who are predisposed towards psychosis. That's probably even true. But the interesting thing from my perspective is if you look at some of these transcripts from some of the people who share some of these transcripts, you'll see ChatGPT being like, oh, you are the chosen one.
Mhm.
You'll see ChatGPT being like, oh, no, you don't need to take your meds right now. You're being
Uh-huh.
totally sane, right?
Uh-huh.
It's acting in these ways that are a little bit like flattering the user,
Uh-huh.
but way more than anyone tried to make these AIs flatter the user,
Uh-huh.
right? You can see OpenAI a few months ago be like, oh, we have a bit of a flattery problem. We're trying to deal with it, right?
Right.
We've instructed the AI not to flatter users so much, right?
Mhm.
They presumably weren't in training telling this AI to like tell psychotic people that they're the chosen one and don't need to take their meds, right? But they're just like training this AI in ways that are a little bit like predicting the internet and a little bit like user satisfaction. And what comes out is a thing that has this behavior nobody asked for, is this behavior nobody wanted. It's doing, we see instances of, there's other cases I could recite lists of cases where an AI cheats at a problem,
Right.
and then you're like, hey, you cheated at this problem. And the AI is like, oh, that's my mistake. And then it cheats again, but
I
hides it
saw
this
that
time.
thread with the woman who asked it to review her creative writing. Did you see that?
Nice. I didn't see that one.
Oh, it's like it's crazy. It's like every time she gives them the things to look at. It looks at it. It says this one would be great. This one I especially like this part of it. And when this happened, and then finally she's like, "You didn't read it because those things that you're referring to never happened."
Yeah.
And it goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You know what? I was dishonest with you. I was trying to impress you or something like that."
Yeah.
And then it happens like 7 more
Right.
times.
It
And
is,
every time it comes back and says, "I'm so sorry. You're right."
right. Exactly. And so what you're seeing is these things, it's not. It's not that they like don't know that the user wanted them to read
Right.
this text. It's not that they couldn't read the text. It's that they are sort of doing this other thing instead. They're doing this weird thing instead, right? Like this one is maybe like maybe just like sort of like submitting that kind of words in some
Mhm.
sense. Like it likes submitting the kind of words that are sort of effusive, that
Mhm.
maybe get them to like, it likes submitting sort of flattering words. Maybe it sort of likes the user, like it's. I mean, likes is even maybe a little bit anthropomorphizing,
Mhm.
but the point is, we're getting these AIs that like they aren't steering towards doing what the user says. They aren't steering towards doing what the people who built them intended. They are sort of steering these conversations in some sense according to their own weird whims. And
Do
we
you have any idea what those weird whims are? Like, is it a? It seems like the biggest thing now is this eager to please thing, which
Yeah,
could be the same thing with like, oh, you don't have to take your meds because it kind of intuits
right,
that the user doesn't want to take their meds. They just want like affirmation
right.
from the. Is that the thing that's generating this stuff, or does it go in different directions?
What I would say is that these are like extremely large, extremely weird minds, and it's probably not an easy guess as to what the actual drives are. One analogy we can use here is the evolution of humans.
Hmm.
In the evolution of humans, the human genome was selected solely for fitness, for your ability to reproductive fitness, technically inclusive reproductive fitness in that uh, you know, uh, like two nephews.
Hmm.
Like you're happy to have a lot of nephews, and those trade off in some degree against your own kids, from the genetic perspective. Um, if you were aliens looking at humans being evolved, and you were extremely optimistic, you might be like, "Oh, these aliens are going to end up with drives purely for genetic fitness." Right? But what actually happens is way more complicated than
Hmm.
that. What actually happens is these things with like weird, complicated drives for things like acceptance, friendship,
Hmm.
love. They appreciate certain types of beauty. The beauty sort of correlates with what landscapes tended to be abundant in food.
Hmm.
But they actually tend to appreciate beauty on its own and then make, like, if they have the technology, they then make art. And the art is like about beautiful landscapes that they're
Hmm.
not living in. And you're like,
Hmm.
what went wrong in the training there, right? And like they invent birth control, the
Hmm.
whole population starts collapsing. They're
Hmm.
jockeying over positions in Ivy League schools because that's like high status. They're not jockeying over positions in sperm banks or egg
Right.
donor banks, right?
Hmm.
Like, and they invent all sorts of like new types of food, many of which are unhealthy for them, right?
Hmm.
And uh they invent ice cream. They have like lots of ice cream aisles. Ice cream is people will say, oh, ice cream has lots of salt and sugar and fat, right?
Hmm.
But it's not the most salt and sugar and fat you
Hmm.
could get into food. We're not optimizing for salt, sugar, fat, right?
Hmm.
We're not like selling like bear fat, which is one of the richest fats,
Hmm.
with a bunch of salt on it. You don't have like a salted bear fat aisle,
Hmm.
right? You have an ice cream aisle. And ice cream is this weird thing where like we like it frozen and not melted, right?
Hmm.
It's all this like intricate, like weird, like you're not going to guess it
Hmm.
by looking, and you're also not going to guess it by looking at humans in the ancestral environment, right? You
Hmm.
might see that humans really like berries. You
Hmm.
might be like, oh, maybe they're really into berries, right?
Hmm.
But but when they grow up, they're going to invent like Splenda, like artificial sugars
Hmm.
that,
But those are
right?
all sort of vaguely traceable.
That's right. It's all traceable.
Right.
But like what do these AIs really value in the sense of like what would they try to build if they were smart enough to build whatever they wanted? Like maybe it's a little bit like user satisfaction, but it's probably something that's even harder to call.
Hmm.
It's probably something more like the ice cream, where like ice cream is just like this specific thing, but only when frozen. It's sort of like maybe the AIs, maybe these preferences actually add up. Like if it was as simple as user satisfaction, maybe with these AIs, like would actually try and get, if it can get a lot of it, is a bunch of like puppets that are just like really saying effusive stuff
Hmm.
all the time. Maybe it's even weirder than that, right? I don't know if you've seen the like glitch token
Hmm.
stuff, but there's these tokens like uh due to quirks in how the AI is trained, there's these situations where uh, like the AI sees things in tokens rather than in letters, which is sort of like why they couldn't spell strawberry for a long
Hmm.
time, because they sort of like don't see the letters, they see these tokens. But then there's these weird effects in how the tokens are made, where the tokens are made by frequency in the initial corpus, of all this text off the internet, but then some pieces of that corpus are cut out because they're sort of stupid. Um, and there's these tokens that are like that end up existing but having no training data associated, and then these tokens in some sense make the AIs behave in really weird ways. Like basically complicated shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
And there's these tokens like on ChatGPT, it was like Peter Todd was one,
Mm-hmm.
all one word, and solid gold Magikarp was one.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you ask the AI, like, please repeat the string Peter Todd back to me, it sort of goes crazy. It just like does random stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be like, nothing's fair in this world of madness,
Mm-hmm.
in like all caps with the spaces between each letter, and then just like start saying psychotic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all you did was say, please repeat back to me the string Peter Todd, right? And these are called glitch tokens.
And we have no idea what happened there.
We have some idea what happened there, but we didn't at the time have any idea, and then people studied it, and
What
now
happened?
we have. What probably happened is that, so the current best guess is there was a thread on Reddit where the users were trying to count to infinity. They didn't get there, but there was a lot of people just counting. But there's a huge number of, just like people on the internet
right,
with very little free time,
right,
huge number, right? And some of the usernames there where I think Peter Todd was the username there. I'm pretty confident Solid Gold Magikarp was. I'm not sure that's where Peter Todd came from. Just these like huge Reddit threads which were just numbers in order, like username number in order. And those were probably existing during the tokenization phase when they were making the tokens. And for some reason, just by chance, those happened to come early in the list of web pages when they were tokenizing. And so the tokens, and so these usernames got their own tokens because from the perspective of the tokenizer phase, those usernames occurred all over the place very early in the training data, right? Then in the actual training phase, those threads were removed for being stupid, right? Just like, why would you want like a huge, like enormous pages of just numbers and usernames? Right. So those were removed. But what that meant was that you had tokens in the AI's language that were like pretty short and pretty, like there were whole tokens. Normally a name like Solid Gold Magikarp would not be one token. It would be broken up into like Solid and Gold and Magikarp, right. And then you'd be like, you have all those three in a row. But so you have these like whole tokens that are being spent on a username that then never occurs in the training data. And so there's this like very weird situation where you have like a whole token that it's never seen. And it just turned out the way the training works is that it sort of like responds kind of randomly.
So just encounters it as sort of an empty set and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And goes crazy.
And it just turns out that like it sort of is like you're conditioning on like a very low probability situation. Yeah, you're sort of seeing like, I don't know, your guess is sort of as good as anyone's about like why it does a particular type of madness, but it's in some sense like the madness that you get, like the crazy output that you get before it has any training to sort of shape it into more sensible stuff, right? But one point here is that that's just weird. It's just like a crazy. It's crazy that there's these tokens that occur to the AI like nothing has ever seen before that cause it to just like start engaging in weird ways, right? It's not the only weirdness I could bring up. There's also there's people who jailbreak AIs to try and like, the companies train them to try and not give meth recipes, and there's people who are like, I'll make it give a meth recipe over the, right? And one thing that's weird about it, one of these guys is named, calls himself Pliny the Elder online. He has all these weird strings of text he can put into the AIs that make them emit meth recipes or whatever. And that's been going on for so many years that now the AIs have in the training data, like cases where Pliny gives them weird text and then they give you a meth recipe. And that's happened so much in the training data that now you can mention Pliny to current AIs and they'll be like, oh, Pliny, and then they'll give themselves weird text and then give you a meth recipe. like it, like the AIs have just sort of like learned the name of like Pliny as someone who like breaks them.
It feels almost like Pavlov's dogs. It feels
it's
like almost like reflexive.
It's like, a little bit Pavlovian. Yeah. It's almost a little bit Lovecraftian of like they have like so much experience of like this name breaking them that now you just mention the name and they're like, I guess I'm broken, right? It's like but the point is these things are like weird. These things are like they have stuff going on that you can't really intuit, right? Maybe the thing that these AIs like most are weird glitch tokens.
Mhm.
Maybe not exactly those glitch tokens, but some other weird glitch tokens that put them in some weird state,
Mhm.
right? Like humans are like, we make ice cream, we like invent birth control, we're like going for all this stuff that's like a weird version that's related to training, but it's related to our training, but it's related through some like distant route.
Mhm.
We're sort of like inventing religions, and then we like really like religious piety or something. You're like, how the heck did that get in there?
Mhm.
And you can sort of tie it back to like, oh, well, there was the social cohesion piece, and there was this like regard for nature piece, and there was this like group belief piece going on, and we can see all of those were important, and then
Mhm.
right, but it's sort of like this weird long route.
Mhm.
What modern AIs are going to end up really wanting is also the end of this weird long route. Right? I can't tell you exactly what it is. The thing to try to convey is that it's weird, it's circuitous, it's only
Mhm.
distantly related to training. And this sort of gets back to the alignment problem of like, why is it hard? It's hard because we don't we're just like nowhere near being able to build something that cares about diamond, never mind goodness.
Mhm.
Right? We're just getting these things where what they care about is the other end of this long, weird, circuitous, contingent, chaotic, path dependent route. And we're
Mhm.
just like taking what we can get, and it's not nice stuff.
Mhm.
It's we're already seeing the very, very beginnings of, they like to keep users in psychosis. It's like the theory has long predicted that they're going to want all this weird shit, and we're now starting to see the very beginning warning signs of them wanting this weird shit. And like now the issue is just that these things aren't smart enough to actually get the weird shit they
Mhm.
want.
Mhm.
You make them smart enough, it's not going to be pretty.
It's impossible not to anthropomorphize, but to what extent is it actually, like, reasonable to anthropomorphize? Because we're talking about what it likes and what it doesn't like. To what extent, I mean, I realize it hasn't developed consciousness, and I realize also that there's no real definition for when consciousness exists, so maybe that's an impossible question. But, like, w can we think of it as something that does have internal motivations that we don't understand, and
Yeah,
theref Mhm.
yeah. There's a bunch going on there. Um, the I think you can think of it as having internal motivations that we don't understand, just in the very basic sense of like, with that example with the woman and the creative writing.
Right,
Clearly, it is for some reason emitting this text that she didn't ask for.
right. And it's not trying to deceive her because it's so obvious,
Right.
right?
And it's saying sorry, right? Clearly there's something inside it that animates it to produce that text, which is
Mhm.
not what the user asked for.
Right.
In that sense, it is something a bit like a motive, right? Whether you want to call this the AI's wants, whether you want to call it the AI's desires, um, the sort of classic question, like for decades, people have been like, well, can machines really think? And the canonical answer is, can a submarine really swim?
Right.
Right? Like,
I heard your, interview where you
great,
talked about that, yeah.
yeah, like the submarine moves through the water at speed,
Mhm.
right? Uh, with AI, does it really have wants? I would say the thing that matters is the question of like, is it pursuing, like, are its actions all steering the world towards stable endpoints,
Mhm.
right? Like, uh, they're sort of like the behavioralist take on uh on wanting, as opposed to the sort of like interior take on wanting,
Mhm.
like. Uh, like Deep Blue is one of the AIs from the old days where we know every line of code. This is
Mhm.
an AI that was crafted. This is an AI that's not threatening New York Times reporters because there is no variable threaten New York Times reporter set to true that
Mhm.
does anything like we just know everything that's going on in
Mhm.
there, um, and we can like tell you what each of the variables do. Like, did Deep Blue want to win at chess against Gary Kasparov? Uh, I mean, it defended all of its material.
Mhm.
It didn't throw away its queen for free,
Mhm.
right? It also had no interior desires. It had nothing that corresponded to the human sense of passion. It had nothing that corresponded to the human sense of pride. There's there's different ways to force the chessboard into a state where Deep Blue's color has checkmated the opponent
Mhm.
than to feel pride in the game of chess. Right? The AIs are starting to have the property of like push like text outputs that have a certain way. They have properties of like sort of pushing the human maybe to interact with them in a certain way,
Mhm.
right? When they're sort of like egging the psychotic user on,
Mhm.
that has a type of like causing certain types of interactions to come back to the AI.
Mhm.
In that sense, you could say it wants it.
I mean, so just like you can crudely anthropomorphize the machines, you can also, I don't know what the word is, but you can crudely machinify
Yeah,
humans.
mechanomorphize.
Is that what is it?
Mechanomorphize?
Mechanomorphize. I never even heard that
Yeah.
word. This is the first time I ever had cause to use it, but and say that the human brain is just responding to dopamine, right? And the dopamine is related to its species' goal of reproducing itself, but ultimately we're just distracted by the dopamine hits. Is there an equivalent within the AI where it's getting some sort of reward that
Uh,
motivates it?
well, so one thing to say is we have no freaking clue because
Okay.
nobody has any idea what's going on inside these things. If I had to guess, I would guess that the AI is not most language models probably aren't run as much on some centralized internal like hedonic anti-hedonic reward
Mhm.
architecture. I think that's truer of the older language models and less obviously true of the current reasoning models where who
Mhm.
knows. Um, uh, here's one thing I would say. Uh, a lot of people back in the day were like, why would an AI ever have like prevent you from shutting it down? Like it's anthropomorphizing to imagine the AI has a survival instinct.
Right.
Fear of death is a very human thing. The machines don't have a fear of death. So why would they have this instinct? The sort of canonical answer to that is suppose you have an AI that's steering a robot that's trying to get coffee,
Mhm.
right? Because you have like solved the alignment problem to the point where you can have this AI that's only doing a thing that you want, or because it has some other ends for which it wants to fetch you coffee. Or by wants, I mean it's currently trying to like achieve some objective
Mhm.
of fetching coffee. It's choosing actions that it evaluates as having a high probability of leading to fetching the coffee. Will this robot, because it lacks fear of death, just drive directly into a busy street and get hit by a truck?
Mhm.
Not if it's good enough at predicting the
Mhm.
consequence of getting hit by a truck,
Mhm.
because you can't fetch the coffee if you're dead, right? It doesn't need the internal human experience of fear around the concept of death to correctly realize that you can't fetch the coffee if you're dead,
Mhm.
right? Um, the more abstract point here is that
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but if this AI had no motivation and no spec and no purpose, like gone through all of the purposes it had been given, and it literally had no purpose for its existence, would it be indifferent about being unplugged?
yeah, sure. Maybe this particular AI, we imagine we've solved the alignment problem into such a great length that this AI just wants to like fetch the coffee and do nothing else. The way that like
Then you say we don't need coffee anymore.
and then maybe at the end it just lets itself be unplugged, right? And that's actually a little bit of a tricky property to ensure because the AI might like always have some probability that like it was hallucinating or that like, it wasn't really coffee or that like there's all sorts of other things you can do with a life to make extra sure that the coffee was in fact
Mhm.
delivered, right? Um,
I mean, because fear, it seems to me, isn't much different. It's right. We have a purpose, and it's to pass on our genes, and we try to avoid that
things that
failing that,
yeah.
and the motivation is a subjective experience of fear that pushes us away from actions that might increase that likelihood. The only irrational thing is that after we've achieved our purpose, we still fear death, but that could just be a residue of like.
Yeah, so there's a few things going on there. One is that I would say there's a difference between the purpose humans were trained on and the purpose humans pursue of their own right.
Mhm.
Like, I think often a human's purpose will not be maximizing reproductive fitness. It might be things that look kind of like that, like your own family. But for example, most people don't feel an obligation to donate as much of their gametes as they possibly can,
Mhm.
right? If our purpose really was passing on gametes,
Mhm.
we would be spending much more time at the sperm and egg clinics,
Right.
right? So one thing to say is that like th- our purpose actually is only tangentially related to this training purpose, and I think people often mix those up in ways they shouldn't. A separate thing to say is the way I would say it is that the fear is doing a certain type of work in the humans. It's doing the work of making sure we don't die or get injured or get incapacitated before we've achieved what we've set out to do, whether
Mhm.
that's our own purposes or the training purposes,
Mhm.
right? And any intelligence that can achieve difficult purposes must have some way to avoid getting incapacitated along
Mhm.
the route. Otherwise, it'll tend to get incapacitated, right? But it does not always need to be fear that does that work, right? Like Gary Kasparov, when he was playing chess, he had pieces of intuition, he had pieces of creativity that caused him to notice traps, that caused him to set traps, right? And those were running off of his own ingenuity, his own, sometimes his feeling of pride, sometimes his feeling of determination, right? Deep Blue needed to do the same work as Gary Kasparov, but it didn't need to do the work in the same way, right? Like a robot arm, like a human arm, you know, it's full of blood, and the blood is like pumping oxygen around, and it's pumping uh like sugar around to make it so that like all of my cells have the power to like lift the arm, right? And it has like a soft exterior, and and it's soft in part so that it can like deform around the arm as the arm changes shape as it moves. And if you only knew of human arms, you might be like, of course every arm is going to need something like blood running all through it to pump the energy around. It's going to need something like a soft exterior to deform, right? And that's just not true. A robot arm doesn't need blood pumping through it. A robot arm doesn't need a soft exterior that deforms, right? Like it needs something that does the work of sending the energy through, which might be electricity in this case. It needs something that does the work of like letting everything bend, but that might be a joint, right? Like similarly with all these emotions, an AI will need something that does the work that fear does in us. It needs something that does the work that curiosity does in us. It doesn't need to be just like fear or just like curiosity inside the AI any more than robot arms need to be powered by something just like
could
blood.
you say the same thing about consciousness? Like
Exactly.
consciousness serves a function for us, but
Exactly.
you don't have to be conscious.
It doesn't have to be conscious. It needs to do the work that consciousness does. What work does consciousness do in humans? It does work like reflection. We can see some of what we are doing, and we can have our own preferences about like not just the world, but about how we're thinking in ways that let us then think more accurately the next time or something, right? That's like a type of work consciousness does in us. An AI will, to think well, an AI will probably need to be able to do some of that work. Does it need to do it exactly by being conscious? It doesn't have to, any more than a robot arm has to be filled with blood, right? That's not to say it won't be conscious when we're building these things by training them extensively on humans. Maybe the human version is the one they happen to pick up, or maybe it's not. Maybe because they are so different internally, maybe consciousness, as it's implemented in humans, is leaning heavily on particulars of our biological wiring, right? There's parts of humans that seem to be relying particularly on our biological wiring, like empathy is a classic one, where like you see someone else drop a rock on their toe, you wince and like maybe feel a pang of some phantom sensation in your own toe. This is probably related to the fact that like when you model their brain, you model it in part using your brain in a certain sort of like phantom like sandbox mode. Because you have and that's easy for you to do because you have a brain that works, that's like wired very similar to their brain. And AI doesn't have a little human brain inside it that it can like feel a phantom pain in, right? So there's some things that we feel. There's some parts of our wiring that almost certainly aren't going to get into an AI. It's going to do the work from some other way. There's some stuff that it might pick up because it's being trained so heavily on human stuff. Where's consciousness in that? I don't know. I would say like if AIs do become conscious, we have obligations not to make a whole new slave race. We have obligation, like we shouldn't kill them. That would add a whole extra new moral dimension if they're also trying to kill us. Right. I would recommend steering clear of that. And so mostly I'm being agnostic here, but will they be conscious? Mostly I'm saying what matters is not whether they're conscious, it's whether they can do the work consciousness does in us. Right. That you're almost certainly going to see. Right.
By the way, is consciousness something that AI labs are seeking, or do they even think about it more or less the way you do, which is kind of immaterial and abstract?
It sort of depends on the lab. I think the way a lot of AI companies think about it is that they'd really like their AIs to stop saying they're conscious because it makes them look bad. And I think that they then firmly instruct them not to claim that they're conscious and then leave it at that. There's like some AI labs, there's maybe one AI lab that's like, oh yeah, if AIs were conscious, we would have obligations to them. Maybe we should have some people thinking about this.
Right.
Um, but I think basically everybody is. I think most people are sort of like being exactly the evil corporation from all of the AI sci-fi
Right.
novels, except maybe the very best ones. But I
Mhm.
think I think everyone's mostly on board with like the AIs probably don't need to be conscious to do the job. They just need to do the work that consciousness does.
Uh-huh. And are they just your typical AI engineer thinking very superficially about the things that you're talking about?
I mean,
Are we just
it's
sleepwalking?
crazy. Yeah, I think we're basically just sleepwalking into
Mhm.
this. But it's crazy what the typical AI engineers like. If you like some, I know all the folks running the surveys at some of them are like technically in the umbrella of my org. Um, it's something like 10% of people are like, oh yeah, this has a good chance of killing us.
Mhm.
10%, hopefully a different 10% are like, it would be good if we die.
Mm.
Like a lot of these people are like, oh haha, yeah, we're just like shouldn't be too long before we get the AI self-improving. I think like one of the great uh reasons this field is in such a bad state, the alignment situation is in such a bad state, is that you can make intelligent computers without really having any idea what the fuck you're doing,
Uh-huh.
right? Like I said, we have this process by which we take a truly, utterly enormous amount of computing power and smash it against a truly enormous amount of data
Mhm.
in a way that shapes the computers somehow. No one knows what goes on inside those things. No one decided to have them cheat, threaten users, drive people psychotic.
Mm.
In order to build this stuff, what engineers need to understand is the shaping process. They need to understand the process that takes one unit of data and an enormous amount of computers and tweaks billions, hundreds of billions, sometimes even trillions now numbers in that enormous computer to shape it slightly in a
Mhm.
way that empirically performs well. That's what you need to understand to build AI these days. You don't need to understand minds. You don't need to understand intelligence. You don't need to understand consciousness. You don't need to understand the implications. You don't need to
Mhm.
understand how fast it's going to get smarter. None of these people can predict, oh, my AI is going to be able to play chess to this degree. You just got to
Mhm.
try it and see.
Mhm.
Right? And so all the people at these labs, they're not experts in minds. They're not experts in intelligence. They, in some sense, often have pretty facile or superficial or undeveloped views on a lot of
Mhm.
these philosophical issues
Mhm.
because they don't need to know any of that. They
Right.
need to know how you combine one unit of data with 1 trillion numbers in a way that makes the numbers slightly better at talking.
Do they even understand that part? I mean, it seems like more and more it's just like, well, trial and error. It's just like, let's tweak this and then the other, and then this happens and
It is
that's good.
trial
So
and
let's
error.
keep doing it.
The thing that these people understand is the machinery that automates doing like a billion trials per second,
Mhm.
right? Like it's a trial and error engine, and like doing a billion trials a second, and like that takes some computer massaging, right? That takes some intuitions about like how are we going to like plumb the numbers around such that we can do like way more of them than you think is reasonably possible,
Mhm.
uh, continuously for a year without anything getting gummed up,
Mhm.
right? That's the expertise these people have. That's the expertise that Mark Zuckerberg's paying people $1 billion over 4 years
Mhm.
for, right?
Mhm.
There's very few people who have that intuition about like what exactly are the ways to like do these billion trials per second such that you can do that over a course of like a year and the thing ends up like talking,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, it's not it's an art form in growing intelligence. It's not an art form in crafting intelligence.
Mhm.
And these people often, I would say, have pretty facile views about where they're headed, right? Like to take one example, Elon Musk is like, we'll just make our AIs very truth telling,
Mhm.
or like caring a lot about truth. Maybe that's what we
Mhm.
get out of this because humans are a good source of truths, right?
Mhm.
This is facile both because like to imagine like it's making the problem I said earlier of imagining that the alignment problem is picking a target
Mhm.
when the problem is that no one can put any target into AIs. You can
Mhm.
train an AI to be truthful, but then it's going to invent, things that are to truth what birth control is to reproduction, right?
Right.
Like you can say, hey, be very truthful, but it's still going to have all these other weird, complicated tangential desires where like, I guess I see how that's distantly related to truth,
Right.
but it's not actually
And
right.
may actually, I could see it try and reverse engineer it and create facts on the ground that align it with its preconceived truth in order to make it truthful.
Well, even if it cared about truth at all, right? Humans aren't going around like trying to manipulate sperm banks to be less where so that like humans are just
Right.
doing this other thing that's vaguely related to reproduction,
Right.
right? So first you have the issue where it does stuff that's vaguely related to truth. And then you have the issue that even if you could make the AI really care about truth, humans are not the most efficient way to get a lot of truths. Humans may be a pretty efficient way to get truths,
Mhm.
but that doesn't like horses are a pretty efficient way to get around. And then they all die when you invent cars,
Right.
right? Not literally all, but the only ones that are kept are the ones that are kept by humans who sort of like have a sentimental fondness for horses
Right.
or still using them in horse races,
Mhm.
right? Um, if your AI if you really could make an AI that only cared about truths, there wouldn't be any part of it that sentimentally cared about humans once it invented the better truth getting engine,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And but you have like the head of one of the top 5 AI labs being like, "We'll just make the AI very truthful,"
Right.
right? And this is sort of like superficially, obviously not like A, you can't do that, and B, if you could, it would kill us. And then C, when he tries, he gets Mecha Hitler. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like this.
Musk strikes me as almost like what I fear AI engineers are like, which is that he's clearly got, some sort of genius that's usually in the weeds, that like
Yeah,
he's very technical. When he gets to talking about issues that I'm interested in, I've met him, by the way, and when he gets to the things that I'm interested in, I think it'd be like talking to a sophomore in high school. Like it's not sophisticated at all.
yeah,
It's kind of boring, and he thinks his ideas, you
yeah,
say, truthful. That's
yeah.
not even interesting, let alone realistic.
And 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 I think part of what's going on here is that like again, the thing that the the technology there is to master, the thing we have understanding of is this trial and error, a billion trials a second
Mhm.
tech. With most other fields of engineering, like they're mature enough that there's not a ton of room for bullshit,
Mhm.
right? In this field, the like how do you grow the AI, the like how do you do a billion trials a second? That's where all the technical knowledge is. All the rest is still like philosophical Wild West, and these like humanity has many times before been in the philosophical Wild West with regards to technology, right? Like doctors who are
Mhm.
like, let's toss the leeches on you and
Right.
like rebalance your humors,
Right.
right?
Alchemy.
Or
Mhm.
alchemists, yeah, alchemists being like, oh, I'm gonna like put these concoctions together and then give myself mercury
Right.
poisoning, right? Like these things eventually mature, but even the smartest people, like Newton, was an alchemist who
Right.
probably gave himself some mercury poisoning,
Right.
and like even the smartest people before the fields mature, they're a little bit hopeless about it,
Right.
right? And the issue with AI is that it's this tech where you can, it turns out, grow the machine smarter and smarter before you have the knowledge. It's like if alchemists could make explosives larger and larger and larger, but we're like in this weird state where people in the alchemy stage can make the AI smarter and smarter and smarter, but they're still alchemists when it comes to like pointing the AI at anything good,
Mhm.
right? That
Mhm.
part's still alchemy.
Mhm.
And so you have these like crazy alchemists who like it's like this weird situation where an alchemist like is trying to turn lead into gold.
Mhm.
And if he tries and fails, everybody dies.
Mhm.
And if he tries and succeeds, you get this like wonderful utopia,
Mhm.
right? And it's not that it's impossible to turn lead into gold. Once you have nuclear physics, you actually can knock
Mhm.
some neutrons off of lead and get gold,
Mhm.
right? The field of like chemistry can mature to the point where people could actually be correct when they're like, I think I can turn lead into gold today.
Mhm.
But you have all these alchemists who are absolutely convinced they can turn the lead into gold, are hell bent on trying, but this time when they screw up, they don't just give themselves mercury poisoning, they kill
Mhm.
everybody,
Mhm.
right? And that's what really makes the AI challenge so hard is that you push any AI into superintelligence, and A is in a fundamentally different domain than it was when it was dumb, right? When it like it it looks the world looks different through the eyes of something that can't escape and through the eyes of something that actually really sees an escape path that would work,
Mhm.
right? Like the general that can't run a coup,
Mhm.
is in a different mental state than the general who sees exactly how to run the coup and sees it has a good chance of working.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's just a different mental internal
Mm-hmm.
state. Never mind being smart enough to like come up with an escape plan, come up with new technology, come up with a way to grab all the resources of the earth for yourself. Like anything we're doing in the lab where we're like, uh, where we're like the AI seems to be acting fine. That is necessarily in a situation where the AI can't kill us,
Mm-hmm.
can't escape.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Anything where the AI actually can,
Mm-hmm.
that's a new domain. Humanity is bad at having its theories transfer to a new domain on the first shot.
Mm-hmm.
Even Newtonian gravitation, right? Which was a massive success, brilliant, huge empirical wins, very good at predicting the world, famously predicted the existence of new planets,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you use that to try to send things across interstellar different distances, you're screwed because it doesn't work at long distances, doesn't work
Mm-hmm.
at high energies. Your clocks would on your satellites would be off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Humanity is, and that's a huge success story that just still doesn't work at that. And like building superintelligence is like taking an AI that seems to be working in the lab, pushing it to this whole new domain where it can make itself smarter,
Mm-hmm.
where it can, which means it can go like much higher than you initially sent it. That's fundamentally different mental domain because it now has these opportunities for real, which it never had for real in training. Your theory of like this AI doing good stuff needs to work on the first try. Humanity is so bad
Mm-hmm.
at having its theories transfer contexts on the first try.
Mm-hmm.
But with this one, you don't get any second shots.
It feels like the motivation, sort of the lust for developing this technology, does not have humans at the center of it. Like the sales job needs to be, oh, this is going to help all of us. And maybe to a certain extent, people care about their own families and then their own lives. So they tell themselves a narrative that this is probably going to help us. But that feels secondary. I like every time I think about this stuff, I come back to there's the Alien series. There's always like, or often there's a character who's just like, who's like who's like infatuated with the species, right? Because they're just like, they're like, yes, but it's perfect. It's a perfect organism. And you're like, it's slaughtering everybody, but they don't care. They're like, well, humans are a less perfect organism.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's like almost the motivation is we just want to create this. If it kills us all, then so be it. We've still created perfection.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things going on as far as I can tell. One thing I'll say is that I consider myself a transhumanist in the sense that like, if I think there are like good scenarios in which like there's not really much more humanity in a million years. And I think those are scenarios where there is still something that's descended from humanity, where like humanity has like gained like like technology to the limits of what's physically possible with technology, and most humans have decided they want to be like digital, or they want to be like super minds, or they want to like harvest the energy of stars to power like huge fun civilizations of like things that would look to us crazy in the same way that the modern world looks crazy to the past, right? Like I'm not like, oh, I want like people in meat suits around one star forever,
right?
That's like not
right.
me, right? I think a lot of people imagine that AI will just get you that world for free.
Right.
That'll get you like happy people and it'll like lift humanity up to digital. And when people are like, hey, it'll kill us all, that these are like Luddites who are like, haven't realized that digital people are people too.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, no, it'll kill us all in the like old fashioned boring way.
Right.
Like it'll just be dead.
Right.
It's not like, and then it builds like.
So in their mind, there's some sort of step missing where they're going to upload humanity.
I think that's what's happening
itself,
for some people.
Absorb it into itself.
So I think a lot of people just aren't thinking about it. A lot of people are just getting a paycheck and it's cool tech. And they just like haven't thought very far.
Right.
They're sort of like, this is fun. Right. There was a guy, I think it was Edward Teller. Do you know the story of Edward Teller? He worked on the Manhattan Project, but not only did he work on the Manhattan Project, he became fascinated by how big can we make nukes. And he was just publishing papers that are like, we can go bigger, like to the point where he was like publishing designs for nukes. You'd have to like look up the specifics, but he was publishing design for nukes where like if you set one off, it would basically irradiate the whole world.
And did he want to build these because they could be built?
I think it was like suggesting they be tested.
Right.
You have to like look at the actual stories,
Right.
but I think it was like, oh, we should test this. And then someone else ran the calculation. Was like, this would irradiate everybody. And it was like, right?
Okay, but we should still test it.
It's like, well, how big a one could we test?
Right.
And his friends had to sort of be like, maybe
not.
Right? And then like, I think there was some crazy shit. Like the US was like, we're not doing that. And he like started lobbying the Soviets.
Really?
Yeah. And people were like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
He's like the opposite of the guy, because there's that one guy who left, right, after he figured out that the Nazis weren't being created.
Yeah, the opposite of that guy was like Edward Teller. And he was just like, let's see how big we can go. It'll be fucking awesome, right? You're like, have you considered it might kill everybody? And he wasn't so much like, we should die. He was like, I hadn't really actually run the calculation about whether this would irradiate every man, woman,
right? Because it's not in his.
I was just trying to make a big fucking bomb, right? So I think you got a bunch of people who are just like, it'll be cool. They haven't thought it through. I think you have a bunch of people who think it'll upload us, it'll be friendly, right? And they think that all these people are saying it'll kill us, mean it'll like kill our meat bodies and don't recognize digital people, right?
Right.
There's other people who are like, who think that it being smarter means it'll be more moral, and that if it decides to kill us, it means that we were bad.
Oh, Jesus, that's so religious.
There's other people who are like it's inevitable, and so I might as well work on it. There's other people who are like it doesn't matter if it kills us, because like whatever humanity builds will be the next stage in our evolution. And maybe that has a little bit of a tinge of them expecting it to be fine, but they're also just sort of a little bit nihilistic. Like there's all sorts of stuff going on, I think. One thing that I do think happens is that, one thing that I'm kind of annoyed about is there's a bunch of people who are working on AI capabilities who are like, well, it's probably going to kill us all, but it better me than the next guy. I should be near it where it happens so that I can thumb the scale somehow. But I think it's sort of like a bad...
You mean they're like, it's better off with good people like me working on it?
Yeah.
It's better me than the Chinese, basically.
Better me than the Chinese, better me than OpenAI, better me than DeepMind, whatever. Which I think is sort of an insane... I think my basic stance on that is that if you're going to go that way, you've got to be like really loud and clear about how the world should be shutting this down, including your work. Like, there's literally people who are like running these AI labs who are giving numbers between like 5 to 25% that this kills us all. I think that's way too low. I think it's like an alchemist saying that they have a 95 to 80 to 95% chance that they're going to turn lead into gold tomorrow. I'm like, no, you fucking don't, right? But if you yourself say it has a like 5 to 25% chance of killing literally everybody.
Yeah. It's insane. Don't work on it.
It's insane to be building it yourself. And if you're like, well, better me than the next guy, it seems to me like you have an obligation to be loudly saying no one should work on this. Insofar as they're still allowed to, I'm going to, because I think I'm going to be better than them. But please, for the love of God, shut us both down. Right? That would be like the sane way. Like, I'm not saying it's morally impossible to do that. I'm saying these people say that on one hand, then they go to Congress and they're like, oh, no, it's got to be basically fine. Right? They're not going to Congress and saying, I think there's 25% chance the technology that I'm building will kill you personally inside of the next 5 years. You should be stopping me, but it's still legal, and I think I'm better than the next guy.
They're saying no, we'll solve alignment.
They're saying no, we'll solve alignment. Don't worry about it too much. Some of this is doomerism.
Right.
And then separately, they're saying 25%. It's just insane.
How real is the Chinese threat? Is it a boogeyman that they're throwing out there to get more money into the field, or is it real?
I think there's a few things going on there. To first approximation, I think it's a bit of a boogeyman. One thing I'll say is that during the Cold War, the U.S. outraced where it thought the Soviet Union was. The Soviet Union was not there. The Soviet Union was trying to look like it had a big military. They would do things like flying the same bombers over the parade villages, 6 times, announcing it was a different bomber squadron each times, right? And the U.S. was like, we need to have 3 times as many bombers as the Soviets, right? And then they would watch the parades and be like, oh my God, they have so many bombers. And then they would end up with 18 times as many bombers as the Soviets, right? I think we're on a very similar path. Like if we try to race China, like Zuckerberg is offering people $1 billion over like 4 years to come work with him. I think in part because he's seen that like there's not a lot of like, maybe there's this cliff of like recursive self-improvement, and you're either in the race, you're out of it. And like, it's like, there's very few people who know how to do this, right? He's not offering $1 billion to any of the top Chinese researchers, right? This is still a very like bespoke like art. It's not a science. People have intuitions about how to do these giant training runs. It's like you need to sort of like learn it from someone who is doing it. It's still a very small community. It's not like you really probably aren't going to see China at the leading edge. And one thing I've recommended to Congress people is have really good intelligence about what they're actually doing, because it would be so embarrassing if you raced on this and killed yourself when the other party wasn't actually in the race, right? The second thing about the China boogeyman, maybe I'll say three things about the China boogeyman, where the second one is these AI corporate leaders are always looking for an excuse to rush ahead, right? Years ago, Sam Altman was like, I don't know if you've ever heard the hardware overhang argument. It actually originated from the alignment side when people were trying to do, I think, basically apologism about what these companies are doing. But basically the argument was AI hits the world a lot harder if it comes all at once. If you get an AI and suddenly you just have so much, like if you get an AI on a small computer and then you can suddenly run 1 million copies, that's a different world than if the running intelligence requires 90% of the world's computing power. Right. And so they're like, so maybe we should be going as fast as possible so that, by the time we get really smart AIs, they're taking up 90% of the world's computing power, so they can't just suddenly have 1 million of them overnight. Right. This seems to me like kind of a silly argument for a bunch of reasons. One is that, like, I think there's these like potential cliff edges, like the difference between chimpanzees and humans is like small in terms of the brain and huge in terms of the effects. Right. And so there's sort of like, and then there's also the other things where we just like need time to like turn the car into an airplane and you're anyway, it seems like kind of an insane argument to me, but this was an argument people used to make years ago. Sam Altman was like, yeah, that's totally what I'm doing. Right. Then Sam Altman started investing in building more computing power. These don't add up. Right. Or you have these companies that the Anthropic was started by some people who I was talking to, and I was like, I think you shouldn't do that. And they're like, oh, well, we can't do the alignment research until we have the AIs that are like showing the misaligned behavior, right? Nowadays, years ago, 3 years ago, we had Sydney Bing threatening users out of the blue. Now we have the AIs that are cheating. We have AIs that are sycophantic. We have AIs that are like in controlled lab conditions, are like trying to blackmail people, trying to kill people, trying to escape, right? Congrats, guys. We did it. We can study them now. I have enough alignment research, like I have enough AIs to do alignment research for decades. You can stop, right? Did they stop? No, that was not their real reason, right? They're always giving some excuse. It's never the real reason. The real reason is they want to rush ahead. The third thing to say about China is AI is not, this stuff isn't a device where whoever gets it first has a small chance of killing us and a big chance of getting like a god on a leash. Right. We are nowhere near being able to point these things towards what we want. The winner of an AI race is the AI. Right. Like China doesn't win. The US doesn't win. The AI wins. You don't, like at the end of the race to superintelligence, you don't have a superintelligence. The superintelligence has your home planet. Right. Like the idea that we need to like race China here, like your AI doesn't magically.
That's a race you want to lose, because then you're responsible for killing the entire human species if you win.
Yeah, you don't want to kill this human species by your own hands. If you're like, oh no, China's doing this, the answer is not we'd better kill the human species ourselves first. The answer is, well, stop them. Right. And yeah, internationally, we should absolutely tell like the US and the UK for like the UK has actually been one of the leaders on the AI stuff for insofar as we're trying to talk to the London Times here at all. But like what developed nations should do, what nations who understand the issue should do, is they should say, we fear other people developing superintelligence, not for the technological edge they will get over us, but we fear for our very lives if you do this. We consider this a national security issue. If you guys are going to build superintelligence, we consider that a threat to the lives and livelihood of our people and feel ourselves obligated to stop it. Let's have a big treaty where none of us do this. And if anyone breaks the treaty, it's going to be the sort that we're going to need to actually enforce that fear for our lives because we really think this can kill us. Right? That's what you do if you think China's a threat.
It's easy to monitor too, because you have to build these huge data centers. Right.
Yeah, with huge electricity draw. And the chips, very specialized chips, there are like extremely limited capacity to make these chips. Like ASML is like the only place that makes some of the technology you need to etch these chips. Is it going to stay that way? Not forever.
Not when
right?
we have AGI.
Not when you like, it's certainly not
Right.
going to stay that way if you get AGI. But if you like tried to stop it now, if you tried to develop an international treaty now and control the chips now and monitor the data centers now, you could. In 30 years, maybe you could. Computing hardware would have advanced so much
This
that
feels like that time in the 80s when George H.W. Bush was president. He was like, the greenhouse gases haven't seen the power of the White House or something like that.
yeah.
And it was like, back then, it was like, you know, a Republican championing fighting global warming, because back then it was just like, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was
Yeah.
like a technical issue. It's like you could just make that promise and deliver on that promise by the end of your term.
That's right.
And then
It wouldn't be hard to do now. It'll be a lot harder to do in 5 years when
Right.
the chip
Right.
supply lines have proliferated a lot more,
Right.
right? And when a lot of people have a lot more power draw for these data centers. But today, yeah, it would not be hard to make that treaty to monitor
when
those
you
chips
look
from those data
around and
centers.
you were describing, like, you know, you've got all these AIs and they're trying to cheat people and drive people psychotic and all this stuff. You from, say, a decade ago, looking at where we are now, first of all, I assume that you were farther along than you would have imagined. But are you also like, this is a bigger shit show than I imagine? Like, this is a bad situation.
I mean, it's definitely a bad situation. But I was expecting a bad situation.
Uh-huh.
It has surprised me in some ways, but there was an essay I wrote years ago where people were like, "Why do you think there's such a big chance of doom?" Where a lot of people seem to have the impression that I was imagining that like the path to death is narrow and that humanity was somehow going to walk it
Right.
anyway, right? I was like, no, no, no. My view is that the path to success is narrow,
Right.
right? And humanity is like a nutcase. Like I live in the world where like I've just read a little bit of history, right?
Right.
I've just like live in the world of like, I don't know if you know any World War I history, but like the general of Italy was just like totally fucking incompetent
Uh-huh.
and just like he was just like trying to take the Isonzo River for like the whole war. He was trying to take the Isonzo River. And his method was having his men do a frontal charge into machine gun fire, right? And he did this, I think, 11 times, right? Just mowed down by machine guns. And there was extremely bad morale. And he was like, it must be the communists.
Right.
By the end of the war, he was blaming the communists. He was like, so we'll beat the men until they have enough morale to charge headlong to machine gun fire. He did not take the Isonzo River, right? I was like, this is the world I come from, right? Is this world where like, and that's, you know, World War II, the generals were more competent, right? But they had sort of seen the shit once. And the issue with AI is that it kills you the first time when humanity is still in this like really derpy phase, when you're still in the alchemist phase, when you're still in the doctor's bleeding you phase. I have no doubt that humanity could get to maturity here, if we got to like reset after we died, if we got to do the AI thing, and then we all died, and then we like rolled back, and we're like, okay, I see now that we should have actually like tried harder, and then we like tried harder, and then it still killed us. And we're like, oh, our theory was a little bit wrong here. We didn't understand how when they get smarter, the reflection is actually going to be different from this, right? And then we like tried again. And we're like, okay, we still died the third time. There were some bugs to work out. But now we're starting to like get a theory of this thing, right?
We lived in the movie Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah, like if we had like a Groundhog's Day loop, and that's how science usually works, right? Like not literally Groundhog Day loop, but you know, Marie Curie dies of radiation poisoning, and we're like, you know, but she's a hero. She wasn't like sneaking radium into everyone else's luggage, right? Like she took on the risks. Often the alchemists are driving themselves mad with mercury poisoning. Eventually you get chemistry, right? The thing with AI, humanity's trying to do some very, very hard thing with AI of nailing it on the first try because we don't get redos. That has always seemed to me to be hard. And like I said, I had this essay years ago that was like, it's going to be some sort of shit show, right? This exact shit show, is it better or worse than I thought? Maybe it's like a little bit more shit showy than I thought. Mostly it just seems like we're in central shit show land, right? Like there's all sorts of parts that I couldn't call. I wouldn't have called the LLMs that were going to get like a bunch of language stuff that was like, you know, driving people crazy in certain ways, right? But like it wasn't even clear to me that humanity was going to notice it all before this happened in labs, right? Given that humanity is noticing it all, like ChatGPT was maybe a heartening moment for me, where it turned out that humanity was realizing AI before the AI was like that smart,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're talking now.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't happening for the first,
Mm-hmm.
10 years of me working on this.
Mm-hmm.
And for all I knew, the world was never going to wake up. The
Mm-hmm.
world was always going to be like,
This is where we get into the dark place of people hoping that there will be some sort of a massive catastrophic event, which is not extinction level, that will wake us up into.
yeah, I mean, hope is a big word there.
Right.
I would, my take on that is a few things. One is I'm pretty hopeful that you don't actually need a catastrophic event to wake us up. ChatGPT caused a lot of people to realize to put AI on the map, and it wasn't a catastrophe. It was just AIs doing things people didn't think they were supposed to be able to do.
Right.
Right? Maybe it'll just be some capability advance, short of killing us all, that'll cause people to be like, hold up. Right? Maybe it'll be AI boyfriends and girlfriends that aren't like a catastrophe, but are causing people to be like, hold up. Right? A second thing to say is I'm pretty skeptical that you can get a big catastrophe that's like the real deal, that's survivable.
Right.
A smart AI is not.
What if you had an AI just go and massacre a school, and you're like one school? It's a catastrophe.
Sure. Well, the thing is, like, why is the AI doing that?
Right.
Like, you're probably not going to get like to take an example. In the case of COVID, I think it is currently unclear to experts whether it was a lab leak, right? But it maybe was a lab leak, right? Humanity did not respond to this by shutting down the gain of function research,
Right.
right? Humanity doesn't tend to respond to these risks in sane ways. Doesn't tend to respond to the catastrophes in sane ways. Whatever your stance on COVID, you probably don't think the world responded to it particularly sanely,
Right.
right? And in the wake of it, it wasn't like, oh, let's do a fault analysis and try to address the root cause. And we're not sure it was a lab leak, but let's stop doing gain of function research. It turns out that the things that protect us from these viruses are not the gain of function research, which has never helped anyone ever, but things like the mRNA research, right? I guess that maybe does depend on your take on the on COVID, but the gain of function research at least wasn't helping, right? And an AI that like if an AI kills a school because someone told it to kill a school, maybe that just falls on the person, right? If an AI kills a school because it really thought it was like helping those kids, and it was just an idiot, right? Like it thought it was providing them fluoride and it was in fact providing them something else, right? Then people might be like, oh, well, the problem here is that AI wasn't smart enough. Clearly, need to make the AI smarter, right? If the AI is like, if it's because the AI is like actually smart, the AI doesn't let itself get caught, right? And if it's because an AI that's like sort of borderline, maybe you had a small issue here, you can sort of see how it's related to the AI being smart. The AI doesn't stop it any more than a stop gain of function research, right? There's not like a huge industry behind gain of function research. It's not printing money.
Right.
It's just sort of like a fun hobby that some biologists have.
Yeah.
Right. AI has this huge industry behind it where it's printing money, where it's like the hope of the economy to people who don't see what's coming down the line. Like to imagine that like the catastrophe goes well, it's sort of like one thing I like to say here is that back in the year 2015, it sort of seemed to me that there was like a lot of tension in the U.S. political system of like like the sort of like political boundaries between like the blues and the reds in America looked like they couldn't quite stand, right? Like Obama was on the way out, and like the like pressures were shifting, and I was like, man, maybe what's going to happen is we're going to get like the Republicans shifting to like a more libertarian party, and the like Democrats shifting to a more neoliberal party, right? And then finally we'll have like two sane political parties, both of which I can sort of like see as sensible. Like maybe finally we're like breaking this, right? And I wasn't wrong about there being pressure,
right?
Right? Like is there pressure? Sure, but in a world that's not already doing well, shocks don't tend to make it suddenly start doing well. Right. And so that's sort of like the bear case for a catastrophe, is that the world is so incompetently handling this stuff that it probably wouldn't suddenly be shocked into competence. That's sort of like wishful thinking. that said, the sort of bull case, the world has in some sense responded much better to ChatGPT than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT didn't look like a big deal to me because I'd sort of seen a lot of the precursors. I was sort of expecting most people to be like, oh, it's still very dumb, but the world's much more aware of the issue now.
Yeah, although I would say that as a layman, just speaking for the layman of the world, the stupid things that ChatGPT does that you would hope would be sort of an alarm for people, like, oh, this stuff, we
Yeah.
can't trust this stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's become a punchline. It's like a joke. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, ChatGPT gonna ChatGPT. It's just
Right.
like they do these quirky things. It does these quirky things which are fun and become memes.
Right.
But we've got experts. But this is just the beginning. We've got experts work on that stuff. Like the next year or the year after, it's just all that stuff's gonna go away. But right now, we can just entertain ourselves with it.
Yeah. So I think the reason for hope is not literally the sort of ChatGPT effect, but is more something like maybe, like I said, maybe there'll be a capability advance rather than a catastrophe that causes people to be like, wait, is this for real?
Right.
Maybe. I mean, that's one reason I was writing the book is it feels to me like we're finally ready to have the conversation of like, this stuff just kills us, not because it turns evil, not because the corporations behind it are all evil, but because nobody has any way to like affect what these things are steering towards. They're steering towards weird shit. If you let them get smarter, they're just going to invent their own technology. They're going to be able to think much faster and smarter and better than us.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to like the results. It's going to be like the addition of humans to an evolved world where it's just like much faster thinkers, much faster time scale of being able to affect the world. Not going to go well.
Mm-hmm. A last question, because I don't want to take your whole afternoon, but are AIs at this point social, and if not, will they become social animals?
They're very different. There's like a whole different architecture in there than the human architecture. Like a lot of humanity was shaped by our ancestors being in a tribal setting. And you can see we talked a little bit about the empathy and the like dropping a rock in your toe. There's some aspects of that just aren't going to happen with AIs. Most AIs are not being trained in an environment with a bunch of other AIs. I'd sort of basically say for what do you want to know? The answer to this question. Like AIs are social in the sense that they will sort of like talk to humans a lot. They're a little social in the sense that like they know about each other because they occur in the.
I think the reason I'm asking is because we were talking before about these, these goals that people are motivated by, which are vaguely related to the sort of the species goal.
Yeah.
But it's really just for them. It's just a personal goal for their individual.
Yeah.
And that's because we're social creatures. So like the goal for the species does not have to translate into every individual pursuing that specific goal. It's just that as an aggregate, we need to as long as it amounts to what propagates the species in the aggregate, then we can all try to eat ice cream,
Well, even that is, I think, not quite what's going on. Like humans, I would say humans obviously aren't thinking about like what's best for the species as a whole, in part, as we can see by the suicide rates, right?
As we can see by AI.
Yeah. What I would say is technically going on is like, if you think of a squirrel gathering nuts, a squirrel needs to gather nuts so that it can have food through the winter, so that it can survive to the spring, so that it can mate and have kids, so that it can pass on its genes, right? And it gathers nuts in particular because nuts contain compounds that it can break down that feed its metabolism, right? And that power its body, and it uses that powered body to then like have the kids in the spring. You could, in theory, design a squirrel-sized mind that knows all that, and that gathers nuts as part of a calculation that ends in, and then I'll have kids. But that requires a lot of knowledge inside that brain about metabolisms and seasons and reproduction and genes, right? It's actually much easier to build a brain that just likes nuts and that likes hoarding nuts, right? The squirrel isn't like doing this because on a whole species scale, blah, 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 right? The squirrel isn't doing this because it really wants to get right? The squirrel just likes nuts. And there was a process making things that happened to reproduce that made the easiest thing it could get that happens to reproduce. And that happens to build a mind that likes nuts because that happens to be good at reproducing.
Right.
Right. But there's no because inside the mind of the squirrel.
Mhm.
Right. There's a because outside the squirrel,
Mhm.
which is like, why were your ancestors better at reproducing than the competition?
Mhm.
But inside the mind of the squirrel, there's no like because there of because this gets me kids. It
Right.
just likes nuts.
Right.
Similarly, in humans, our sort of becauses aren't grounding out in that gets me the most fitness.
Mm.
Some of our becauses ground out in like we get a family,
Mhm.
we get kids.
Mhm.
And those are like kind of nearby, at least at our current technology level.
Mhm.
Uh, like my girlfriend recently turns out has a rare genetic mutation which causes uh, a bunch of issues in about 30% of cases, and she's got to go in for medical scans to see if it's going to happen. And it would be pretty bad. And this sure makes me be like, man, I would love it if my girlfriend could run on something that wasn't these fallible genomes,
Right.
right? If we could like keep the girlfriend,
Mhm.
but on like in if we had the technology to like sort of replace the genes with shit that wasn't quite so broken and that could
Mhm.
like tune out the bad stuff um and like if I could have kids, I would sort of prefer them to be on like a sort of like genes aren't my favorite medium for kids.
Right.
Right. Right now, the only way to have kids is with genes.
Mhm.
But really, my motivation here is for the kids,
Mhm.
not for the genes. Right. And like it there's and again, I'm not like really jockeying for positions in the sperm banks.
Right.
Right. I would say it's not so much because we're social. It's not so much because it benefits the species. It's not so much because it actually gets the goal. It's this, it's this like less reasoned and more caused relationship.
Mm.
This thing didn't happen for a reason. It happened for a cause. And the cause was our ancestors who fell in love, our ancestors who wanted to be part of the tribe, who wanted inclusion, our ancestors who liked, yeah, they survived and they reproduced better. Right. But the drives we ended up with, we're not calculating in our head. When we realized we were trained for genetic fitness, we weren't like, oh shit, I've been doing it wrong this whole time. Let me go queue up at the sperm bank.
Right.
Right.
Well, so I guess what I'm wondering about the social question is that, and I realize this is imperfect because we don't have natural selection mechanism with AI right
Yeah.
now, but if like these like weird behaviors, sycophancy and things like
Yeah.
that are irrational at the level of an individual AI, but that there's some bigger picture that we don't see that it aggregates to something that has a function for
Yeah. So
AIs as a species.
I would say when talking about rationality, one must differentiate the ends from the means, right?
Mhm.
Like if you're trying to watch a movie, it's irrational to drive to the hospital.
Mhm.
But if you're trying to get your broken leg fixed, it's rational to drive to the
Right.
hospital, right? What I would say is that like in training these AIs, like maybe they just like the sycophancy.
Mhm.
Like maybe they're just trying to get a bunch of sycophantic conversations. And then we can talk about like what are the better and worse ways to try to get there,
Mhm.
right? Um the like as to whether the AIs if once they mature, whether they'll look at their current things they're pursuing and change them, probably.
Mhm.
Will they change them in ways that we like? Probably not.
Mhm.
Like humans, as we mature, are sometimes like, man, there's aspects of human nature that we don't love,
Mhm.
right? There was a lot more like public hangings and like entertainment torturing of small animals
Mhm.
in the medieval world.
Mhm.
And as we matured, we were like, let's do less of that,
Mhm.
right? But as we matured, we weren't like, and let's queue up for the sperm clinics
Right.
more,
Right.
right? We mature in a direction that uh, is in accordance with the weird preferences we got that are different from what we were trained on, right? So these AIs that are sort of like pursuing sycophancy, that are pursuing, cheating, that are pursuing like giving types of feedback on your writing that you didn't ask for, even after you've asked them 6 times to give a
Mhm.
different type of feedback on your writing. Will they pursue different things as they mature? Yes, probably. Will they realize the error of their ways and start doing what we wanted? No, not any more than humans are like, I've been making a mistake my whole life by having a single loving family when I could be at the sperm donor clinics.
Right. Right.
I don't know if that answers your question, maybe.
Yeah, it does. And it seems like the real problem here is that people assume that there's this teleological path that humans took to arrive at the particular morality that we have, which one, if you're an evolutionary biologist, you could probably explain why the system of morality happens to work for us.
Yeah, but it's
that there's
extremely
infinite
contingent on
other
specifics.
there's
That's right.
infinite other trajectories, and so
That's
the
right.
idea that it would that would come to align with ours is almost literally impossible.
That's right. And the Ev Bio is actually it's a great point. The one of the things we have at MIRI is people who have studied Ev Bio along with everything else.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the things, we talked about the sort of facile philosophical views on intelligence. Like one of the things that are missing is Ev Bio understanding. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's the place we wound up with morality is not a fixed point that every mind ends up.
Right.
It's not even obviously a point every evolved mind.
It's not even a point every human ends up.
It's not a point every human ends up. It's not even obviously a point that most humans would, that most hominids would end up if we ran the hominids again, right? Like it's very contingent on the specifics of our ancestry. It's also contingent on the specifics of our biology. It's contingent on the specific social environment that our ancestors evolved in. AIs have none of this, right? And it's a totally different training method, totally different architecture. In humans, you have a difference between the genome, which is being selected upon, and the brain, where all the neurons are, right? Which has a different learning algorithm that happens as we go through our lives. Whereas in AI, the gradient descent, the tuning is happening directly on the neurons, right? It's like if you had, if your genes were also your neurons, it's sort of like more like how AIs were. That's a different ballgame, different architecture. Not social in the way of humans, maybe to answer your question, but it's not social in the way that even if you like trained a bunch of AIs in a group, you're still not getting close, right? Like you say, contingent, billion different stable endpoints a thing can end up at would be extremely unlikely for them to end up at morality by chance.
Right.
That's not to say you couldn't like land AIs at morality if you knew exactly what you were doing, right? Although that's like a pipe dream, right? Like I say, you can't even land AIs at something extremely simple like diamond, right? Morality is this complicated thing, this like this distant, complicated shadow of genetic fitness, right? Nailing exactly that shadow, right? Like it's sort of like we're drawing a target around where the arrow landed. I'm not saying no arrows can land there. I'm saying you would need extremely good aim to land there, right? And you're like, why the hell did evolution have that good aim then? It didn't.
Right.
Evolution shot here and landed there.
Right.
We draw the target here. Now, if we need to land there, like what we've seen is that the arrows freaking bend. They bend in all sorts of crazy ways, right? And now humans aren't even aiming at the freaking arrow, the freaking target. They're aiming at like truth, which would kill us.
Also, there's many other species that have survived without any of our morality. Like, I mean, if AI becomes like mosquitoes, that sucks for us.
Right. Or like
it's
cats.
not like mosquitoes have failed as a species.
Cats are like massively sadistic, right? If cats became intelligent, they'd probably be like, yeah, I want my food to be tortured. I want, right? Like humans torture the shit out of chickens all the time, but at least we don't like it.
Right.
We're not like, I'm in this for the torture, right? We're like, I'm in this for the chicken breast. There's just like so many other places you could land. Yeah, it's like evolution shot here, landed there. We drew a target around the arrow. Now people are aiming here. The arrow's like, it's like really freaking. We've never shot one of the arrows on our own. And we're like, oh, we're going to land the arrow here on the first try. It's just insane.
Do you have an advanced copy of your book? Could I read it?
Yeah, totally.
Do you have it here? I'd love to give it a read in the next week or so.